Good morning. It's Friday, December 5th. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 792 days old. I'm your host, FDD Senior Research Analyst Natalie Ecanow, filling in for John Schanzer. Welcome back to the FDD Morning Brief. President Trump is reportedly planning to announce Gaza's new government and proceed to phase 2 of the ceasefire by Christmas. If things go as planned, Hamas will need to disarm and surrender control of the Strip. In the meantime, the U.S. is apparently working with Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey to negotiate an agreement with Hamas. Are the Qataris and the Turks committed to seeing Hamas lose its teeth? Given that they're longtime patrons of Hamas, probably not. Word on the street is that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is skeptical these talks will pan out. Me too, Bibi. Me too. Today's guest is Leah Siskind. Leah recently joined FDD from the AI Corps at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. She's our first ever AI research fellow, focusing on how our adversaries use artificial intelligence to target the US and our allies, including Israel. John and Leah caught up recently for a pre-recorded conversation, which we'll play for you shortly. But first, I want to take you south of the border. Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke with Fox News' Sean Hannity the other day about Venezuela. Things are heating up in the Caribbean, and yes, a lot of that has to do with drugs and dictators. But Rubio also noted that Venezuela is an Iranian foothold and that people don't talk about that enough. Okay, Secretary Rubio, let's talk about it. Iran and Venezuela enjoy a robust and mutually beneficial partnership. They have for years. Iran's exported drones to Venezuela and frankly fathered the Venezuelan drone industry altogether. Apparently, Caracas reached out to Tehran in October asking for GPS scramblers, drones, and other military equipment. Then there's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the IRGC Quds Force, which, believe it or not, have boots on the ground in Venezuela and use the country as a staging ground for terror plots. Iran's intelligence ministry also maintains a physical presence down there. Last month, news broke that the IRGC had plotted to assassinate Israel's ambassador to Mexico. The lead operative worked out of the Iranian embassy in Venezuela. And if you've been following FDD for a bit, you may have heard an expert or two of ours mention the name Masih Alinejad. She's an Iranian-American journalist whom the IRGC plotted to kidnap in Brooklyn, New York. According to a 2021 indictment, the Iranians considered taking Alinejad to Venezuela by boat. Economically, Iran and Venezuela help each other evade U.S. sanctions through a range of businesses: oil, gold, drugs, the works. And we haven't even touched on Hezbollah's activities in Venezuela and across Latin America, which is a whole other ball of wax. The show must go on, so I'll leave it there. But Rubio's right. This is an important conversation, and hopefully it's just getting started. Now for your headlines. Headline 1. John's told you all about Qatari money in Gaza, from the $400 million pledged to Hamas-run Gaza in 2012, to the suitcases of cash that arrived in the Strip with Israel's approval, to the documents Israeli troops discovered suggesting that the Qataris discreetly pumped millions more into Hamas's coffers. So no, John and I don't think it's a good idea to have the Qataris help fund Gaza's reconstruction. Here's another bad idea: Chinese money helping rebuild Gaza. Yesterday, Chinese President Xi Jinping said Beijing will provide $100 million to help with reconstruction and ease the humanitarian situation in the Strip. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas sent a thank you to Xi, expressing his heartfelt appreciation for the cash and for Beijing's steadfast support of the Palestinian cause. Headline 2. The Pentagon deployed a new type of drone to the Middle East. They're copycats of an Iranian drone called the Shahed 136. The American version is being produced by a defense company based in Arizona. It's got a wingspan just over 8 feet, can fly for about 6 hours, and costs approximately $35,000 a pop, which is wicked cheap compared to America's most advanced drones. The new drone is named Lucas. The Pentagon is deploying a squadron under Task Force Scorpion Strike to the Middle East. It'll be the U.S. military's first one-way attack drone unit based in the region. Over the summer, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth rolled out a drone dominance initiative that envisions the U.S. military buying cheap drones from American companies and quickly putting them to use. Well, here you go. And headline 3, Iraq added Hezbollah and the Houthis to its asset freeze list. But it was short-lived. Iraq's official gazette published a notice in November announcing that the government was going to freeze the money of Iran-backed terrorist groups. That includes Hezbollah and the Houthis. For some reason, the story didn't make headlines until yesterday, and when it did, Baghdad quickly reversed course. Iraq's central bank issued a document clarifying that the asset freeze only applies to individuals and entities connected to ISIS and al-Qaeda. Washington has long been concerned about Iranian influence in Iraq, and some Iraqi officials want to ease American concerns. But this bait and switch demonstrates that Baghdad's loyalty still lies with Iran. All right, it's time for that pre-recorded conversation between John Schanzer and Leah Siskind. Have a listen.
Welcome to the FDD Morning Brief, Leah Siskind.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. All right, we're going to talk about AI today, artificial intelligence. You work a lot on that. You study it. You're looking at the role that it is likely going to play or that it's already playing in the realm of the military and intelligence, foreign policy. Tell us a little bit about how this new technology is starting to creep into all these important geopolitical spaces.
Absolutely. And it's evolving and touching different aspects of our lives on a daily basis. So from everything from education to how we shop to how we work. But one area that I think is greatly overlooked is the national security implications of these tools. I think in our rush to adopt them, that sometimes we can be a little too hasty and not fully acknowledging all the ways that they can impact us in a negative way.
So in what way are we seeing this stuff creep in?
So first of all, I think it's important that people are aware that there are a lot of malicious actors out there, extremist groups or adversarial nations who see this as a new attack vector for the United States and our allies like Israel and Ukraine and Taiwan. And this can happen on a variety of fronts. This is altering countries' military capabilities. The new battlefield, I would say, is kind of narrative dominance and their ability to influence how history is taught about issues that are very controversial and important to these countries. So there's a lot of different new vectors, new kind of battlefields for challenging one another.
Okay, well, let's use a specific example here. Iran. During that 12-day war earlier this year, back in June, they were using artificial intelligence to try to influence the battlefield. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Iran is a very interesting character to watch in this space. They are very prolific in their use of AI for disinformation. So in the midst of the 12-day war, we saw them using tactics that they had tested out before during the lead up to the election, and then they kind of put into full practice during the 12-day war. So they were really successful, well, not successful, I would say, but they were really aggressive in their use of deep fakes. Some successful in achieving their target of causing confusion, others not so much. So for example, as they were kind of struggling on the physical battlefield, they were trying to put out into the world the notion that they were actually having much better success than they really were. So for example, they were releasing tons of deep fake videos that were created with artificial intelligence. And they would show a prominent site in Israel being bombed or attacked. So you might have seen some videos of the Israeli towers being hit, or videos, very realistic looking videos of Ben Gurion Airport just completely bombed out and smoldering. And all of this was completely fake. They would repurpose videos from other conflicts, like videos from the war in Ukraine, and then just kind of slap some labels on it and say, this is happening in Tel Aviv right now. There was a real range in quality. Some were really, really well done. Others were pretty sloppy. You'd see like a video or a picture of a building that said Mossad outside in English. So it was pretty silly, but probably the most concerning thing we saw, and they were actually able to distribute these fake looking kind of public service announcement messages that looked like Israeli public service announcements. And they were distributing those through WhatsApp groups that were telling Israelis, do not go to bomb shelters, avoid bomb shelters, because those are actually targets. You'll be safer in your home. So this kind of thing, undermining Israelis' confidence or their understanding of how the war is progressing, causing confusion, causing chaos. This can be just as effective and damaging as the physical war itself.
Wow. Okay. That is part of what we would call the information war, right? Cognitive combat, as some people would call it. And AI is playing an increasingly outsized role in what traditionally would have just been disinformation, things that would be posted on the internet, before that things that might be published in a newspaper or a magazine. This is an age-old challenge, but it is now on steroids now, right? I mean, that's kind of what AI is doing in this space, is it not?
Yeah, that's you summed it up perfectly. For decades, our most powerful adversaries like China and Russia have attempted to kind of own the information space. If they can control the narrative around topics that matter to them, that they can influence a new generation of people to maybe have more sympathetic views of their countries, of authoritarian systems, and the ultimate goal is to undermine confidence in democracy, in capitalism, and in American values. So one of the ways that they do this is there's a million different tactics that you can try to exercise influence over AI tools. And I'm going to speak specifically about large language models. These are the tools that are the most common form of AI that we're all using. So these are things like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and things like this. There's so many different tactics, but one, for example, we call model grooming, where they try to steer the coverage of an issue that they care about, say the war between Russia and Ukraine. And one of the ways that they can do that is these models are they're only as effective as the information they have to train on. So on breaking news events, they don't have that much information to go off of. So Russian propaganda news organizations like Pravda, last year alone, put out 3.4 million articles just to flood the zone with content. And you see other adversaries doing similar. Al Jazeera is maybe the most successful actor in this space of just producing so much content so that if you have any question about any aspect of the war between Israel and Gaza, you're going to see citations from Al Jazeera. So they've been very effective in this space.
Yeah, too effective in my view, and that we can thank the Qataris for. I want to dig in a little bit into this app that is generating a lot of controversy here in the United States. There's a debate over it. FDD's been right in the center of it. Talking here about TikTok. What's the story there, and why is this on your radar?
Yeah, TikTok's been on my radar for a long time. I remember as a federal employee in 2020 when they were banned from federal devices, which I thought was long overdue. And then, of course, we had congressional action to actually ban TikTok because people could see that this algorithm, which determines what people are seeing, and it's primarily young people in America. Last time I checked, there were over 150 million TikTok accounts in America. So about half the country is using this app, and a lot of them are getting their news from it. And there was always some concern with, should the Chinese government, who of course has ultimate control over any company in China, should they really have that much influence over what the American youth are seeing? But it was really October 7th that I think was the game changer, because people always said, that what the algorithm is serving is just a reflection of the interest of people looking at it. But there was a stark difference after October 7th. And you would see, I don't remember the exact stat, but the disparity between the amount of pro-Israel content and pro-Palestinian content was it was so egregious, and everyone could see, and everyone could notice, and was calling this out. And so the idea of then TikTok as a way to kind of to survive this this congressional action to ban it in America is to spin off the company, have the data stored in America, because that was also part of the concern that the Chinese government would have access to how all of these what their viewing habits are, what they're interested in, what their values are. Now the data in this new proposed deal, the data would be owned by an American subsidiary owned by Oracle, but the real concern is the algorithm is still coming from China. So China is still going to have far too much influence over what half of America is watching every day.
Yeah. And I guess, the things that we've heard about TikTok is that, if social media in general is where 80% of people under 40, I think that's the number that people are throwing around, that they get it from channels like TikTok or apps like TikTok. And the Chinese Communist Party controls that information. That's insane. That's like giving ABC, CBS, and NBC over to the Russians during the Cold War and then expecting to win the war of ideas, right? So this is, I think, this explains the imperative of having TikTok handed over to some kind of more responsible party. But we've got to make sure that we get a handle on that algorithm too, because as I understand it, the algorithm, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mark Montgomery from FDD conducted a study through a third party and found that something like 75% of the material on TikTok was anti-Israel and only 25% of it was pro-Israel. And then it's exactly the opposite with Instagram, a US-based app that does pretty much the same thing. They were 75% pro-Israel, 25% anti-Israel. In other words, you get a sense that like these algorithms they're absolutely manipulating the content. So I guess we've got to get a handle on that.
Yeah,
that's highly relevant.
I have to say I can't endorse any social media tool because the truth is that they're all easy to manipulate. If a bad actor wants to influence people's perspective on an issue, it's relatively easy to do through social media. So I can't say with confidence that any one social media app is safe, but I think the important takeaway here is that for people who think that by an American subsidiary owning the data for TikTok, that's going to somehow make Americans safer, I want them to understand that that's only one piece of the puzzle here, and that the algorithm is still going to be a major concern.
Yeah, I get that. All right, last question before I let you go. Israel. Talk a lot about what Israel's doing in the AI space. Startup nation, right? Supercharged on tech. What is Israel doing in this space? What should we be watching for?
Sure. So really the AI space is kind of dominated by United States and China when it comes to frontier models. There's a lot of conversation, when we talk about AI in the news, we're talking about frontier models, we're talking about chips, we might be talking about data centers. And so you're not hearing that much about Israel, but I think you're going to start hearing a lot more in the future. Right now, Israel, the United States really kind of dominates in most areas, chips, apps, of frontier models, of course, but there's one area where we have a weakness, and that is the actual security of the models. This is classic Israel. Is just like they led with cybersecurity about 10, 15 years ago. Now they are dominating this new field of AI security. So this is the security of the models and making sure that the models themselves are the tools that you're using are protected. And as we all begin to use AI tools more in our work, and ultimately we start connecting them to other tools that we use, like email, like our documents, it opens up more vulnerabilities. And so making sure the only way we can truly reap the benefits of these AI tools is if we're using them safely. And this is where we're seeing this plethora of Israeli companies really flourishing. And it's definitely catching the attention of Silicon Valley. We've seen a bunch of acquisitions lately. And right now, the US Commerce Department is actually taking into consideration, they're trying to define what the American AI tech stack should be, which is what we want to export to the world. And I would say there's a strong argument that Israel should be considered America's trusted partner. There's a special category there for trusted partners, and that we should kind of bundle our technology together, include Israeli AI tech as part of the American AI tech stack, and kind of go to market together.
Interesting. And I think really the timing couldn't be better. Israel's obviously just spent a huge amount of money on this war, $98 billion, probably more than that at this point. And we're also talking about a memorandum of understanding, a new arrangement between the United States and Israel coming up over the next couple of years. They're going to have to renegotiate. And, we need to make sure that there's give and take, right? That both sides are benefiting from this. Maybe Israel can use AI and its advances in that space to help, level the playing field. All right, we're going to leave it there. I want to thank you, Leah Siskind, for joining us today on the FDD Morning Brief.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, here's what our experts have been tracking lately. FTD's Bonnie Glick published a compelling piece in the Washington Reporter highlighting the core flaws of the current new Gaza plan, namely that it hinges on a couple of unlikely hypotheticals: Hamas's disarmament and the international community's support. Bonnie's prediction is that Israel will remain responsible for Gaza while fighting a Hamas that's still kicking and taking a beating from the international community when things go wrong. Meanwhile, my colleague Jennifer Richmond has an article in the Washington Free Beacon examining how the Chinese Communist Party is pushing its ideology into U.S. classrooms with targeted funding. The real cost of accepting China's money is high. It comes at the expense of our own principles. And speaking of foreign influence and funding, which seems to be the theme of the day, in my last piece for Town Hall, I commend the White House for starting to act against the Muslim Brotherhood. This isn't a far and away problem. The Brotherhood's ideology is seeping into American classrooms, and I fear Qatari money shares a chunk of the blame. But the Trump administration continues to treat Qatar as America's darling in the Gulf. I'm no psychologist, but seems there's some cognitive dissonance going on over at the White House. And with that, your Friday episode is finished. If you're looking for more analysis, check out the expert analysis on our website, fdd.org, read our quick takes on X, or watch the videos we post on Instagram and YouTube. Tune in Monday for another episode of the FDD Morning Brief. John Schanzer will be back, so it's goodbye for now. Thanks for letting me host you this week. I'm Natalie Ecanow, signing off for FDD.